All right, welcome everybody to Align Your Money with Your Values, Take Charge of Your Card. This is the third in our Responsible Finance series of webinars brought to you by Green America. We're a leading nonprofit organization dedicated to creating a socially just and environmentally sustainable society. My name is Cathy Becker, and I'm the Responsible Finance Campaign Director for Green America. We have a great webinar for you tonight, but first I'd like to tell you just a little bit more about Green America. We operate on the belief that individual actions, when multiplied, can drive significant societal change. Our theory of change is rooted in empowering individuals and businesses to make conscious choices that prioritize people and planet. Through innovative campaigns, advocacy efforts, and educational programs, such as tonight's webinar, we strive to inspire and equip individuals with the knowledge and tools they need to affect positive change in their communities and beyond. From advocating for fair labor practices to promoting renewable energy solutions, and as tonight, helping people align their money with their values, we're committed to addressing the most pressing social and environmental challenges of our time. So through this webinar, we're going to explore responsible credit cards, how credit cards work, the background information you'll need, and also unveil a new guide to finding a responsible credit card. And we'll delve into the practical solutions to build a more sustainable future for all. Together, let's harness the power of collective action to create a world where people and nature thrive in harmony. So now I'd like to introduce the facilitator for this webinar, the Reverend Amy Brooks Paradise, North America organizer for the global environmental nonprofit Green Faith. Amy is a Unitarian Universalist minister working on climate finance and Green Faith circle development. And I've had the honor of working with Amy on a curriculum about aligning your money with your values in banking, credit cards, insurance, and investing. Great. Much of what you'll hear tonight and throughout this webinar series comes from that curriculum. So welcome, Amy.
Thank you so much, Cathy. And I'm so glad to be here with all of you this evening. Welcome. I'm noticing that folks are dropping where they're from in the chat. I love Fancy Gap, so shout out to my part of the country. I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina. We're glad you're all here tonight. And for those of you who are asking, there will be a recording available as well. This is the third of our series, as Cathy mentioned. And this evening, we're going to be focusing on credit cards. You know, those convenient little cards that just charge away and like you just have all the money in the world. And here to help us set the stage for this conversation is Fran Teplitz. Fran is an expert in this area. She worked at Green America from 2000 to 2023 and was most recently an executive co-director, focusing on Green America's programs in the area of green business, socially and environmentally responsible banking and investing, and public policy. Fran's roles included serving as the director of Green America's Green Business Network and director of the Responsible Finance Program. Her work on impact investing included community investing in banking, shareholder action, and fossil fuel divestment. She also managed Green America's role in coalitions related to sustainable business and economics, climate change, and other policy issues. And she is now retired, but still volunteering with several local organizations where she lives in Maryland. And she remains active, as you can see this from this evening, with Green America. So Fran and I are going to have a little conversation here, and then we'll get to the training or sort of information sharing part of the program. And I want to say up front, we encourage you to put questions in the chat as you go along, and we will do our best as we go along to answer those if we can, or at the end, there will be some time to ask questions, and we will circle back and pick up as many of those good questions as we can. So Fran, welcome.
Thank you.
We're so glad you're here. We're so glad you're here. So I feel like I'm in the presence of a true expert. That's 23 years of banking and investment experience. So let's dig into this topic. I'd love to start by just sharing a little bit about how you got involved in finance, and then maybe specifically with credit cards.
Sure.
How did you get hooked on this?
Yeah. So As we know, the political windows for progress can sometimes be closed or just barely cracked, right? But individuals and institutions still have the power at all times related to how we want to deploy our assets, whether they're few or great, right? We can use the power of the dollar to affect positive change all the time. We can cut back on consumption where that's needed. We can expand consumption where that makes sense, perhaps buying more organic food, for example. We can shift our dollars to bank accounts, savings accounts, investments, and credit cards that do a better job of supporting people and the planet than their conventional counterparts. So the ability to make a positive difference with our dollars that can be pursued in any political climate has appealed to me for a long time and very much attracted me to Green America membership and ultimately to the Green America staff. I also have to say up front that an overriding concern and crisis we face, of course, is climate catastrophe. And while large-scale global and national political action is absolutely imperative, it's also crucial for all of us to do what we can to not support the big banks that are bankrolling the climate crisis, through their lending. And of all the banks in the world, it's the US big banks that provide the greatest support to the fossil fuel sector. And I know many Green America members and others on the call may be familiar with reports that have come out over recent years that it's JP Morgan Chase, Citi, Wells Fargo, and Bank of America that are leading investment in climate destruction. So having bank accounts and credit cards that are not tied to those banks is especially key. So Amy, how did you come to the Better Finance movement?
Oh, that's a great question. I grew up in a very rural community, and we didn't have a lot. And my aunt used to say that we were Scotch-Irish and we had a gene for stingy. So I think I came by being careful with my money, honestly, from a family that didn't have a lot and tried to take care of the things that they had. But I got really involved in it more recently because I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. And it is the home and the headquarters of one of these big banks, Bank of America. So when I started doing political climate activism and faith-based activism, I looked around for what would be a good target. And there it was, a giant tower of corporate power. And so that became the thing that pulled me into this climate finance work. I guess the other thing that I would say is, if you're lucky enough to have some money, it's easy to just spend it and not think too much. And so I think I've really tried to be thoughtful with the gifts that I've received over the years and hearing about how easy it really is to take that for granted. As a person of faith, it's really important for me to be very thoughtful, careful, and in line with my values when I think about spending money. So it fits in a lot of different ways for me.
Mm-hmm. And you had also asked about credit cards specifically, not just the broader finance movement. And so one reason that I've been very interested in helping people switch to better credit card options is that it's a relatively easy, practical step. While it does require some thought and research, like joining today's webinar to get good information, it's an easy on-ramp. It's a first step, right? It's an on-ramp to what Cathy was referring to in terms of the process, an ongoing process of aligning one's assets with one's values. There are more considerations involved in redesigning an entire investment portfolio, for example, right? But selecting a better credit card is a meaningful step that someone can take pretty efficiently. Another reason I've been attracted to it and seen how it resonates with people is that it's a visible step. Whenever you pull out your card, you are reminded of your commitment to better finance, and you can show it to others to get a conversation started about why you chose that card and its positive impacts for the climate and even for greater economic justice, depending on the type of bank or credit union that your card is tied to.
Those are such great points. I think another thing that is interesting to me about the whole credit piece is who gets to have credit. Who gets to take advantage of credit? And how does credit and having credit impact your whole life? So we all have heard of things like, what's your credit score? And so there are a lot of ways in which this easy card can actually be both difficult and dangerous if people aren't understanding how credit works and what are the ways in which they can get trapped by having credit or getting poor credit. So I think there are a lot of things to think about when we start talking about credit cards, not only related to the planet directly by what money's being spent on or being invested in, but also that it contributes to some of the other issues that are also related to climate justice or climate injustice. And that is, who has money, who has access to resources, who gets the opportunity to be free enough to move to a new home if their old one gets destroyed. I mean, there's just all these things that are wrapped up here. And as a person of faith, that's also really important to me because it's a very deeply seated justice issue. And so I really like the intersectionality of thinking about how money and economics crosses over into housing, into racial issues, into access to healthcare. I mean, these are all related. And so the bottom line is, the issue of credit. And if that is sort of rotten to the core, it means everything else is going to be problematic also. And so it gives me another, really strong reason to try to do my best job at being clean with my money, being thoughtful with my money, being responsible with my money, including my credit cards and my credit.
Well said.
So, yeah, thanks. So I just wanted to close this out. You mentioned this earlier, credit cards are an easy place to begin. Is there anything else you want to add to that, Fran? Because we're going to get ready to go here in a couple of minutes. So I want to give you a chance for any last comments you may have before we get started.
Sure. Thanks so much. I mean, I think when people are thinking about their credit card, they don't off the cuff say, okay, I'm now embarking on an ethical decision. And we just want to reinforce that there are important ethical dimensions to this. Of course, you're going to look at practical terms related to your card, but we also want to bring that additional overlay of the moral imperative to align your values with your banking as much as possible. We touched on the climate issue, but there are also other societal impacts that the big banks have related to racism. There's a long history of racist policies, from redlining, which is now illegal, but up to the current day, we see report after report coming out about how far the big banks still need to go in terms of racial justice for their employees and giving borrowers and depositors equal treatment across race and ethnicity. There's so much more work that needs to be done on that front. And not surprisingly, then also in terms of sexism, the highest paid and most senior banking positions are held by men. Women, and especially women of color, run up against what's been called the broken rung in career advancement, right? They just can't get higher up that ladder the way that white men have been able to do. So yeah, there are a lot of considerations when we think of the type of financial institution, whether it's a bank or a credit union, because with every swipe, we're having an impact. And today's webinar is all about making sure that all of those transactions are feeding into the best economy possible, and that we can do that by switching our cards.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Fran. And the questions are already coming fast and furious. People want to know about this bank, about this credit card. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And I want to continue with our presenters. And so I want to introduce both of our presenters who will be sharing the time this evening. And they are none other than Cathy Becker, who is, as she said earlier, the Responsible Finance Campaign Director now at Green America, where she helps people align their money with their values in banking, credit cards, insurance, and investing. Major projects include a nationwide directory of community development banks and credit unions, a first-of-its-kind directory of regional mutual insurance companies. I can't wait to see that one. And an Investing 101 mini site. Previously, she led Ready for 100 Ohio, which worked with Columbus and several suburbs to enact electric aggregation for 100% renewable energy and directed the local sustainability nonprofit, Simply Living. So welcome, Cathy. And then our second co-facilitator is Michael Richardson, who is from Third Act of Upstate New York and is on the steering committee of New York Renews, the force behind the landmark the New York State Climate Act. He is also convener of the Rivers and Mountains Green Faith Circle, a multi-faith group of climate activists in the Upper Hudson Valley of New York State. From a varied cachet of experiences, including organic farmer, solar heating contractor, labor economist, county legislator, and Buddhist practitioner, Michael is committed to bringing attention to the moral imperative to stop funding climate chaos. Michael, welcome. And now I want to turn it over to the two of you to share this next block of time and tell us all about how we can have really clean credit cards. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Amy. I'm the first presenter up in this presentation. I'm just going to go off script for a minute because I want to call out that all four of us here in this webinar have been at bank actions recently, this week, in fact, at least for most of us. Amy helped lead a bank action. She mentioned living in Charlotte, the headquarters of Bank of America, and Green Faith had an action there. I was at an action where I live in Columbus, Ohio, where there's a major Chase Bank headquarters here. Fran has spoken at numerous bank actions in Washington, D.C., and in front of probably most of the big banks there. And Michael, my co-presenter tonight, actually was one of 32 people arrested in front of Citibank headquarters in New York City yesterday. So all of us are walking the walk along with talking the talk about this topic, and I just wanted to acknowledge that. So tonight we're going to talk about a little bit about what's the problem, some of it, just a little bit of review to ground in where this originates, which is banks that issue credit cards, how credit cards work, so you know kind of how the money changes hands behind the scenes. And then Michael has a new credit card guide for, with some very specific recommendations and suggestions for some good cards. And so we hope that this will help you take charge of your credit card. So as Fran and Amy were talking about, at its heart, this goes back to the climate crisis, and that's a spiritual, ethical, and moral issue. The issue is we're placing money and profit above all other considerations, such as our health, our own health, the health of people, the health of other species, the survival of other species, the health of our entire planet, and our democracy, our society, and our children's future. And so we, as citizens of this planet and this country, are trying to take action, at least with our own money, so that our money is not feeding the money pipeline in the wrong direction, so that we can help turn that around and feed that into the right direction. So the heart of this particular issue is the big banks. And as Fran mentioned, the big four, Chase, Citi, Wells Fargo, and Bank of America, have put in literally they've put in about $1.4 trillion into the fossil fuel pipeline. That is since the Paris Agreement. And the 60 largest banks around the world have put in 5.5 trillion. But the top four, 1, 2, 3, and 4, are these four American banks. And those are also issuing a lot of credit cards. So if your credit card is from one of these big four, the fees that you pay, those are annual fees, interest fees, transaction fees, those are disproportionately used to support fossil fuels, because these banks disproportionately invest in fossil fuels. They lend a lot of money to fossil fuel projects, which the fossil fuel companies could not build these pipelines or these big oil drilling or big fracking projects without those loans. And so your credit card could represent a substantial part of your carbon footprint, known as financed emissions. So what we're doing is, it can be seen as part of the larger divestment movement. There is a worldwide divestment movement of taking our money out of the fossil fuel pipeline. And so this is a table of institutional investors from the divestment database. So far, over 47 trillion has been divested by about 1,600 institutions. Now we're individuals, and individuals don't have as much as an institution like, say, a house of worship or a university. But a lot of individuals together, all of us working together, do add up to a large amount. And the banks are starting to respond. We are starting to push them. HSBC in 2022 pledged no funding of new oil and gas projects. We don't want them to fund any projects, but starting with new projects, that's a good place to start. So how do credit cards work? And a lot of this I learned since coming to Green America. So how credit card issuers make money, there's 3 types of fees, and there's a lot of money wound up in each type of fee. So there's the annual fee that some people pay, some credit cards have this, not all do, but they charge you an annual fee to be able to even use the card, and the average annual fee is $128. Some of them come with perks like travel assistance, say, for that annual fee, but the issuing banks make a lot of money from that annual fee, $13 billion in 2020. And then there's interest fees, and that's if you have a carried balance, if you don't pay off your balance in full each month. And the interest rates on credit cards are extremely high, as you probably know. The average last year was over 22%, and it seems to keep going up every year. And most Americans, 3 in 5, have credit card debt. Americans rely a lot on credit cards just to get by each month. Credit card debt as of December of last year totaled over $1 trillion, and Americans are paying billions of dollars in interest and fees each year. And then there's the transaction fee, and that can be hidden from the user of the card because you don't pay it, the merchant pays it. So if you go out to eat at a restaurant and your bill is $100 and you pay with your credit card, well, the merchant gets maybe $96, $97 of that, and the rest of that is a transaction fee that they pay, and they pay to the issuer. And so then the issuer, sometimes they have like a rewards program or a cash back program. So a little bit of that comes cash back to you to keep you using the card, and then the rest goes to the bank that issued the card. And so banks, again, are making billions of dollars off of these transaction fees. So those are kind of the 3 types of fees that we're concerned with. So even if you have a card that doesn't have an annual fee and you pay it off each month, you might think, well, what's the harm in that? Well, there's still this transaction fee. So the next related thing to be aware of is branding versus issuing. So you might have, like a store card, and this is an example of an Amazon store card. So the branding you can see on the front. This Amazon card uses Prime as its branding, but most people know what that is and what that means, that that's related to Amazon. But it's not Amazon that gets the money when you pay your credit card. Like if you have this card, when you pay your monthly bill, it doesn't go to Amazon. You might get free stuff off of Amazon as a payback to keep you using the card. But no, it goes to the issue of the card, and that's usually on the back in smaller print. And you can look at the bottom of this one and see the issuer of this card is Chase. And so Chase issues a lot of different types of co-branded cards. So do all the other, big banks, but so do other companies that we'll get into in a minute. So that's an example of a co-branded credit card. Co-branded credit cards can be store cards, so like a Lowe's card, a Sam's Club card. They might offer cash back or merchandise as a perk. Many of these store cards are issued by a company called Synchrony or Comenity. Comenity recently changed its name to Bread Financial, so you see both names for that. But some are issued through big banks, for example, that Amazon card, or Costco is a very popular place to shop. A lot of people go there. A lot of people have the Costco card. That's issued through Citibank, and our allies at Third Act and Stop the Money Pipeline have a campaign asking Costco to kind of ask Citi to stop funding fossil fuels, or else to get Citi to take its cards somewhere else. So another example of a co-branded card is an affinity card. So that might be where you support a nonprofit through your credit card purchases. So some of the money of that transaction fee goes to support that nonprofit. And that's an easy way to donate to a nonprofit, usually about half a percentage point. But again, you have to look at who's sponsoring that, which bank is issuing that bank, because sometimes, even for some environmental nonprofits that I've heard of, it's a mega bank that's issuing that. So then finally is credit card networks. So that's things like Visa, MasterCard, that's also on your card. So where do they fit in? So they're not a bank, at least Visa and MasterCard aren't. They're a payment processing system. They're just a way to move money back and forth over a global network. So there's Visa and MasterCard, and Discover and American Express are the main ones. Discover and American Express, besides being a network, are also an issuer. And so that's part of why Capital One is trying to merge with Discover, and that's why they want Discover, because Capital One is not an issuer, but Discover is. And so they think that would get them access to the Discover network. So networks do collect a very tiny little fee, like a 0.14% for each transaction. So they're not really on the fossil fuel spectrum. They're not making tons of money out of this. But they are, if you look at who owns them, who their stockholders are, then they are stockholders such as BlackRock, Vanguard, asset managers that are heavily involved in fossil fuels. So, they're not totally clean either, but they're not really the same as like lending directly to a fossil fuel project. Okay. All right, now I'm going to turn it over to my co-presenter, Michael Richardson.
Thank you, Cathy. Let's get right into the first slide, because that's a good talking point for us. What we want to highlight here, I think most of the audience understand this is one part of a four-part series where we have banks, credit cards, insurance companies, that's home and auto insurance, and then finally your investments that you have through mutual funds and exchange traded funds. So we lay out this scenario here that if you are banking with one of the mega banks, a disproportionate amount of your money is finding its way into the money pipeline to fossil fuel ventures. Your money is literally being loaned out to these enterprises to extract, process, transport fossil fuels. And if you want to get away from that, it's rather simple. You just leave these big banks and go anywhere else. And in the United States, in almost every community, there are quite a few good community banks or credit unions. Now, some of these community banks might be large regional community banks, and others small local community banks. And then there are the credit unions. So if you want to go from, shall we use the word harm to no harm, it's relatively easy. You just leave the big banks and go anywhere else. Now, in one of the other webinars that we did, we looked a little closer on how do you go find a bank where your money can actually be doing good. So harm to no harm to doing good. And we came up with some search engines that we could go to where we could do our research on these community banks and credit unions to see how they were making loans in our community towards things that align with our values. All right, so now what about these credit cards? It's a little different than having our deposits loaned out unwittingly to things that we don't agree with. This is where we're going to make a purchase. And as you well explained, there's a little percentage of that purchase that gets siphoned off and finds its way to being a huge profit margin for these Wall Street banks. Well, that doesn't align with my values either. I want to have a credit card that is going to not do that. It'd even be nice if I had a credit card that went off to doing some good. We can show you some of those as well. But it's not so easy as it says here on this slide, finding a community bank in your area using these tools like Mighty Deposits, the Green America Bank map, or Bank Green. We need to go and ask a few more questions. And one of the problems is we don't have available to us one of these search engines like those three in the green there, Mighty Deposits. So if you need to find a credit card that's not putting part of your expenditures. You're not feeding into the money pipeline. The easiest thing to do is to go with a community bank or a credit union that issues its own card. We could simply say green bank, green card. But maybe you're like me. I bank at a very small community bank in upstate New York. It doesn't even offer a credit card. I also know some folks that bank at another regional community bank. It's a very, very good bank. I'll name it, Berkshire Bank from Western Massachusetts. They actually offer a card. They don't issue it. They offer a card, but it's issued by Elon Financial. And Elon Financial is owned by US Bank. So green bank, shall I say, dirty card, that doesn't work. So if you either are with a community bank or a credit union that doesn't offer a card, or you're with a community bank or a credit union that has a card, they're offering it, but it's by another source like Elon Financial or Citi or Chase or one of the Wall Street banks, what are you going to do? Well, you have to go to the marketplace. So let's take the next slide and see what that shows us. We like to promote right up front credit unions. And it's not that I want to give any type of special favor to a credit union over a community bank, but we recognize that credit unions by their very design are to put money back into the community. The members of the credit union, the depositors, own that credit union. So we'll start with credit unions to just give them a little bit of a nudge. Now, okay, here we have a situation where I have a credit union or a bank that does not issue their own card. And so I need to go out looking for a place where I can get, let's call it again, a green credit card. On the left hand there, you'll see some credit unions that have restricted membership. That means that you cannot get the card unless you live inside their location. We've listed some of the top ones that you'll see on many of the lists that are promoted by climate and environmental groups. Self-Help Credit Union. Now that's a state credit union. Quickly look immediately to the right and you'll see Self-Help Federal Credit Union. That's spawned off of Self-Help State Credit Union. They are separate, but yet, shall we say, related. So if you live in North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, you might want to take a good look at Self-Help Credit Union for a credit card. Or there's one there, Pleco from California. If you're in the Lower East Side of New York, there's a credit union for you. Greylock Federal Credit Union in Western Massachusetts. And we even, just so we get around the country here, Clearwater Credit Union. The list is long. These are just 5 to give you an example that they are out there, and you could just give them a phone call and ask them what their terms are. But what if you're not in those regions and you want to look out further? On the right-hand side, we are given some open memberships. So with Hope Credit Union, which is a Black-owned credit union in Mississippi, Louisiana, Arkansas, Alabama, and Tennessee, there, Cathy, you and I could go and get a credit card. Now, there is one minor requirement. We have to open up an account. Now, that account may be $25 or it may be $100. So if you open a Hope Credit Union account, they will then issue you a credit card. The same thing goes on with Self-Help Credit Union, Federal Credit Union, California, Illinois, Washington, and Wisconsin. Open up an account, they'll issue you a credit card. They don't care where you live as long as you open up an account. With Alliant Credit Union, that's another one we're listing. It's an online-only credit union. Affinity Plus up in Minnesota, they'll issue you a credit card. And there's Agricultural Federal Credit Union, which is commonly called AgFed. So let's take a look at another slide. And for all of you in the audience there, we're going to come back with a rather extensive Q&A period. More than just our normal 10, 15-minute Q&A, we're going to extend it this time for more specific questions. So here with the credit union options, just a couple of notes that if you are going to have a credit union that is going outside their network. If we went back to that previous slide, don't do that, but if we went back to this previous slide, Hope is issuing a card for themselves, and Self-Help is issuing a card for themselves. But there are many credit unions out there that do not issue a card for themselves. They go elsewhere. And we don't want them going to Elon Financial or the other Wall Street banks. So where do they go? The term that they use is agent credit card issuer. So as it says there on the chart, many credit unions offer credit cards featuring their logo, but outsource the issuing and servicing to an agent credit card issuer. The three most noted are listed there. Each one of those, America's Credit Unions, formerly CUNA, and PSCU Co-op Solutions, are both trade associations made up exclusively of other credit unions. Credit Card Services for Credit Unions is a private entity that is wholly owned by other credit unions. And so even though your credit union is not issuing its own card, it's using this agent that, shall we just say, is disconnected from the money pipeline to fossil fuels. We need to put in a special alert. We mentioned Elon Financial earlier. It is a subsidiary of US Bank, which is a major funder of fossil fuels. And as it says here, they are the issuing agent, the agent credit card issuer for over 300 credit unions in the United States. Let's take a quick look at the next slide. We're going to go over to banks. Now, here, the options are also rather slim. These days, there are very few banks, other than the major Wall Street banks, Chase, Wells Fargo, Citi, and the like, that are functioning as agent credit card banks. So just like with the credit unions, there are few out there. Right now, it's basically down to two majors and one minor. They're listed here. First National Bank of Omaha. Earlier in the chat, somebody asked about Amalgamated Bank. Amalgamated Bank offers a credit card, doesn't issue it. Who issues it? FMBO. And there's a list there of 4 other banks, plus also the labor union, SEIU, has a co-branded card that's issued by FMBO. The other one that we listed here is TCM, which stands for Total Card Management. It is a wholly owned subsidiary of Independent Community Bankers of America. This too is a trade association that is made up of community banks. Their sole purpose for TCM is to issue credit cards for community banks. And we've listed here a few, one being Native American Bank. There's a cooperative bank there in Cape Cod. A cooperative bank is a little bit like a credit union, but it's under the bank charter instead of the credit union charter. And we've listed a few others, including, for those of you that golf, you can get your PGA credit card, and it's issued by TCM. So let's look at the next slide. And here I just want to do a little caveat about TCM Bank. Now, again, there's very few options. If your bank does not issue a credit card and they're going outside to get someone else to issue it for them, and it's not going to be one of the major Wall Street banks, the options are pretty much limited to FMBO, TCM, and also an up-and-comer out in the Midwest, Bank of Missouri. TCM has been downgraded by some of the climate groups out there due to, as it says here, a statement on climate risk that they have in their literature. There is no indication whatsoever that TCM or ICBA have loaned to or invested in fossil fuels, but they have taken a position that they are opposed to any regulations by state or federal government restricting banks or credit unions or others in how they invest their money. And so that's where they refuse to give a pro-ESG statement, and they really don't even give an anti-ESG statement. They just say that they're not in a position to give any statement, and they don't think that people should be asked to. So again, some climate groups have downlisted TCM because of that, but here's the problem. If we don't have TCM, then we only have FMBO and some upstarts like Bank of Missouri. And we've often had to remind people, as we did with our banking seminar, that if you're looking for perfect, you're not going to find it. You said earlier, Cathy, that and we'll take a peek in our next slide, that who actually owns some of these other groups? There are shareholders out there, and some of those shareholders are the big asset managers that are involved in the fossil fuel industry. So you can see there on the right-hand side also with Elon Financial Services, where it was 300 some credit unions, 1,300 banks. And I might note that Elon issues credit cards for even some of the B Corp banks and climate-friendly banks that we list as desirable banks. So it's good to know who's issuing the card. You may have a good bank like Sunrise or Berkshire, but your card is going to be linked to Elon. Let's take a look at the next slide. The marginal credit cards. And the list is there: American Express and Discover, Diners Club, and Cathy, as you mentioned earlier, these are also networks for the processing of the cards. But American Express and Discover and Diners also issue credit cards. You mentioned Bread Bank, Synchrony Bank. There's also Service First Bank, UMB Bank, and Capital One. Now, all of those that are listed above there, from American Express to UMB, are not major investors, or they're not making loans to fossil fuel ventures. Capital One is a minor lender. And if I could borrow a joke from the workshop that I do, that I've been invited to a dance, and I go to the closet to get my best shirt. I don't have any shirts in my closet. What do? Well, I go to the hamper and I get the cleanest shirt in the closet. And that's what some folks might want to do. So if you have a Capital One card and you don't want to go out there looking for other cards, you're not really tied up with a financial institution that is a major lender in the fossil fuel business. But anyhow, let's go back. What's wrong with American Express? What's wrong with Bread Synchrony? As you mentioned earlier, the campaign to get Costco to dump Citi, the alternative is for them to go to Synchrony or Community. But yet, trying to find perfect is a hard thing to do these days, that these credit cards are issued by these financial institutions where a significant percentage of their shares are owned by these large institutional shareholders, such as Berkshire Hathaway, that's Warren Buffett, people that own Geico, BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, and the like. And they are major investors in fossil fuel companies. It gets back to the old conundrum that who owns money? Money owns money. The big banks and the big asset managers are the ones that are out there owning the other banks and the other asset managers. So let's take a look at the last slide and then move our way over to questions. Here are the worst cards listed. I guess we started out with credit unions, community banks, the marginal ones, and here's the worst ones. And these are ranked 1 through 35 by the amount of investments that they have, loans that they're making in fossil fuel ventures. Last slide. And Cathy, it's our understanding that we're going to make these slides available to everyone. So here are just some resources. Again, we would suggest that you go back to Mighty Deposits or some of the other bank indexes, our list, and check out your banks. But you can also use these sites from the credit union associations and the federal regulatory agencies, the FDIC. If you cannot find a particular bank on one of these lists, it means that it is a different type of an institution than a straight up credit union, a state regular bank, or other type. So let's try the questions here when you're ready, Cathy.
Okay, I'm going to pop it over to Amy to handle the question and answer.
Yeah, hi, thanks. And we've got some good questions. Thank you for a great presentation. A virtual round of applause to both of you. Yeah, people have been asking lots of questions. I'm going to start with one that is familiar, but because so many people are concerned about it, and I think we should answer that one first. It's about, does the process of switching banks to a more green option affect your credit score? More specifically, what does it mean if I close an account that I've had for decades and I switch to a credit union for banking? So you're moving from something where you've been solidly invested and involved, and suddenly you're like changing it up. How could that affect your credit score?
Well, I'll quickly jump in here, Amy. Changing your banks is not going to change your credit score. Changing your credit card very well might. And so you want to be aware of what's going on here. I've had some consultations where someone said, I have 7 credit cards. Now, the one thing you don't want to do is change all 7 of those credit cards at once. This is a gradual process that you might want to take 18 months to do. So we do have what's called office hours that we can promote a little bit later in the workshop, where you can get a peer facilitator to come in and just kind of guide you through some of these curveballs. So be aware that changing your credit cards can affect your credit rating, and you just need to do it in a smart way. If you have one credit card and you get rid of it to get another credit card, you're not going to have any type of significant impact. The problem is when you start working in multiples. Fran, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, just one additional thought is, or to underscore, yes, be mindful if you're in the process of buying a home, a new car, something like that, you know, where you want to preserve your credit rating, wait till you get past that and then do it at a logical time based on your financial life. We've also seen where your credit score may take a slight ding, but then it will bounce back up again. I mean, it's not a permanent, oh my gosh, now I'm down at this lower level forever and I can never regain the status or the number that I had before. You continue to pay and so forth. In a period of time, you'll be back where you were. And again, yes, you want to do this in a thoughtful way based on what's happening in your economic life.
Yeah, so just to reiterate, to be sure I heard, like if I'm about ready to go out and make a big purchase like a home, I'm not going to start doing all of this financial changing. I want to show stability. I want to wait until I've got my new loan and I'm established, and then I could start doing some of this stuff. So timing is everything.
And again, your banking is not going to be the issue. It's going to be your debt. You're managing your debt. So you wouldn't want to go out and say, rack up a lot of debt when you're about ready to take on more debt.
Got it. Great. Well, thank you. I hope that answered. I believe it was Anne's question. Let's see. There was an interesting question. What are the pros and cons of supporting a local credit union versus a bigger bank? Especially one that has good initiatives. And we heard another version of this question. There was some conversation in the chat about, well, let's keep them separate. So what are the pros and cons of supporting a local credit union versus a bigger bank that's doing some good stuff?
Well, if you have a bank that's doing some good stuff, stay with them. But our problem is the big mega banks are not doing good stuff. Again, this is a little bit on the other webinar that we did on banks. Wall Street banks, as we call them, exist for the purposes of providing complex financial services for Wall Street companies. They're there to have business transactions, manage money, leverage loans, and the like, bring in investors, do underwriting for major Wall Street companies like Exxon and the you know the list. We don't need that. How many of us would agree to this slogan? Eat local, shop local, bank local.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. And credit unions, as you may know, are based locally, and you have a specific membership. That membership is also often tied to a geographic region. It may be tied to a profession, but again, the focus is on serving its members rather than the primary focus being on serving corporate America. You could bank or get a credit card, as we've mentioned, from a community development credit union, a community development bank. There's a term, a governmental term, the Minority Depository Institution, an MDI, that's, for example, a Black-owned bank. So again, look at who do you think they're really serving? What are the economic opportunities that they're opening up? What is their real intention? And that will differ from a conventional mega bank.
So we've got lots of questions here. I'm going to keep going. I don't know if Ashley's question got answered. I think it did. They wrote, I recently got a credit card through Amalgamated with First National Bank of Omaha. How can I tell if that's an okay option? And I think we answered that question. It's a really good option.
Amy,
So,
I'll tell you how good it is. That's the credit card I use.
All righty. Peter S. asked, I don't think I heard Capital One in the top 5 list of bad banks, but how do they rank?
Again,
That's
we
back
put
to the
them in
banking question. Yeah.
we put them in the marginal list, and I spoke about that very, very briefly, that they are a minor lender. That's the bank that, or excuse me, that's the bank of the credit card that I referenced on the cleanest shirt in the hamper.
Great. Here's a question. Why are there very few options of banks issuing good credit cards? Is it because the, big banks are in big money and so they just aren't good, or they have a lot of power? Why are there so few good options, good credit card options?
Fran, I have some insight on that. Do you want to take it first, though?
Sure, happy to comment on that. So the back end processing for credit cards, especially if you're talking about an enormous scale, many small to mid-sized banks just don't have the capacity for that. And so, like the example with Costco or some of the other larger institutions, where can they go given the tremendous volume? They can't use a little credit union. And so we've seen ever increasing concentration of power, money, clout, in the largest banks. And it's hard for others to compete and to get to scale. So I think it's really important. Don't let perfection be the enemy of, making a change. It's very powerful not to be in the worst banks that are bankrolling the climate crisis and other injustices. Do make a switch. And then you may find, sometimes, there are bank mergers. I mean, something may happen, but you will at least be in a far better position than with the largest big banks that exist.
I mean, when we started putting together that one chart that has FMBO, First National Bank of Omaha, and TCM on it, we also had Beneficial State Bank there, which is a very desirable bank out on the West Coast, but you must live in Oregon, Washington, or California. They have, to my surprise, in a conversation with their management just this past week, they are not going to be issuing credit cards for Aspiration or any other institution. They're bringing it all back in-house and just doing their own credit card. So Fran is very much right. It's not really so much the big fish eating the small fish. It's the little fish are just dropping out of them.
So I think we've answered a couple of questions. One is the process of switching to a more green option. Will that bank, a more green option bank, does that affect your credit score? And I think we heard that that's not the case. And then another, how do I find out if my bank's credit card is issued by someone else? And that was answered by flipping over the card and looking at the issuer, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, here's one thing. If you're questioning your current card, the answer is, where do you send your check every month? For example, I have that Amalgamated card. That's where it's branded. I don't send them my check. I send my check every month to First National Bank of Omaha, and I do it electronically. The other way is you flip it over, as Cathy showed you, and there'll be a statement there. So first of all, if it's issued by the branding bank, say about First National Bank of Omaha issues their own card, Beneficial State Bank issues their own card, you won't see anything other than their brand. But if it's issued by another bank, it will say. But what if it says nothing? Well, that too means that it's being issued by that brand. So if you have a credit card that's issued by a credit union and you flip it over and it doesn't say any of this, that means that that credit union is issuing that credit card.
So hopefully these are quick. What is your card still doing something if it's not closed, but you're not using it? Is it doing any harm? It's just sitting there, so nothing's happening. Okay.
But well, here just quickly, Cathy mentioned that there's three ways that the banks make money. One is your annual fee. So if you're still paying an annual fee on that card, that's bad news. The other one is the debt you're carrying. Well, that's not an issue. So again, if you're not using your card, you're not causing harm. So that would be another thing, that if you went out and got another card and you didn't want to cancel your card to affect your credit union, just mothball it.
Yeah, your credit score, it wouldn't matter. Yeah. So someone asked about debit cards, which are really cards issued by the bank to manage your money in your bank. So that's kind of a different thing. Do you want to, they were just curious about what about debit cards?
Yeah, again, a debit card is the same thing as a checkbook.
Okay.
Just one thing to be careful of in terms of better banking practices would be unfair fees associated with withdrawing more money than you have, and how that can accrue and drive low-income people into greater and greater debt.
That's so true. So getting punished if your balance drops below a certain point and so forth. Or if you
Well,
do, some places are like, if you take out more than, if you do 10 transactions in a month, they'll start charging you. Yeah.
And Amy, just not to eat up too much time on this, but remember, when you use a credit card, it's insured. And it's fairly easy to take a bad purchase and get it protected with a quick phone call. Not so with the debit card. So a lot of folks don't use their debit card as loosely as they would their credit card. They use it more for fixed purchases, where you have a number on file with an account.
That's a good point. So we have one person on the call who was curious. They spend a couple of months traveling in Europe each year, and would like to use some of the credit cards. I think the question is, would they be able to use one of these credit cards overseas? So like an FMBO card or Omaha, that one that you have, Michael. I never get all the words right.
Yeah, there are some credit cards. This is one thing you want to check out, as Fran said, that you want to see the full portfolio. What points are they offering? Are they cash back cards? Are they this? Are they that? Some will have foreign transaction fees, some will not. Now, for most of us, the number of foreign transactions that we might make, what would it add up to? 70, 75, $100 maybe. But if you're doing a lot of it, well, you might want to look around for a card that doesn't have foreign transaction fees. Or I know some people that keep their old Citi card back just for that purpose.
Okay, we still have a lot of questions. Let's see here. Some people are making comments. I think there's a question about Discover cards. Somebody wanted to hear a little bit more about Discover cards. And then there was also a question about, will Elon appear on the card issued by a credit union?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes to Elon. Okay. Let's see. Lots of people are in the process of moving their money. We have a lot of shout outs to some credit unions in different parts of the country that are doing a good job, and they love their banks and they love their credit cards. So that's helpful. And I think there was another question that I wrote down earlier. Nope, I think we got most of them. Am I missing any question that somebody else saw?
Amy, let me get a question that I get over and over again about
Sure.
what all those reward points. Now, first of all, we advocate for cash back, because you can get a 1.5% cash back card, you can get a 2% cash back card, and that goes a long ways. Most of these other cards are equal to about 1%. And even the points that you get, the rewards for a hotel stay or an airline, it equals 1%. You're better off getting a cash back card and going out and buying your hotel stay and whatnot. You'll get more mileage. I'm going to double use the word, more mileage on your mileage card. But again, a lot of us got those cards because we were walking through an airport and somebody said, if you sign up right now, we'll give you 30,000 points, miles. And you say, sure, and you grab that. When you leave a club, Those points stay with your club, even though your card is cut up. So I had a Citi card with American Airlines. I still have those points with American Airlines. I had another Chase card with a hotel chain. I still have those hotel stays. They stayed with the club. I just don't earn more points.
Got it. So here's one. When you use a debit card, does the merchant get charged a fee?
They do have a transaction fee, yes.
Okay.
That's why, but see the difference, we didn't get into it heavily. When you use a credit card, there are three players. There's your bank, the merchant's bank, and the network, Visa, MasterCard. When you use the debit card, there's only two players.
Got it. And here's the one about Discover that I couldn't find earlier. Did Discover make a corporate decision to not invest in fossil fuels? If so, don't they advertise this as a good thing that people would be happy to know?
Now, again, American Express and Discover are both, we would say, not involved in the money pipeline to fossil fuels. They are in making money on money. They function like a straight line capitalist bank. Now, the problem is who owns them. And so I love this. I do this all the time. Who is the largest shareholder of blank? And if you do, who is the largest shareholder of American Express, who are you going to see? Vanguard, State, the same bunch of asset managers. Big money owns big money, and that's really down the line. Now, when you look at who are the major shareholders of First National Bank of Omaha, you don't see them. They have more regional investors that are in them. So again, the only problem with Discover and American Express is who really owns them. But as far as being directly involved in the money pipeline every time you make a purchase, no, that doesn't happen. You could say with your American Express card that you have a green card if you want to.
And it's even
Maybe
greener,
it's great.
isn't it?
I'm seeing comments in the chat. It's wonderful to hear about people who have made the switch and those who are considering it. And I just wanted to interject one more activist step to take, that it's best not to just quietly switch banks. It's really important to tell the bank that you're making the switch, and Green America has a sample letter, whether it's a bank account, a savings account, a credit card. Again, a sample template to give you some ideas. You want to speak directly from your experience and what you're concerned about, but we have a model letter that can help guide you so that the bank is aware, oh my gosh, we're losing clients because of X, rather than some of the reason that we weren't competitive enough on fees or whatever the issue may be. It's really important to articulate why you're switching. So just wanted to be sure to get that out there.
That's so important, Fran. Thank you for raising that. And I've had like 4 messages for one last question. USAA issues Visa cards. Any information about USAA? No.
I can jump in on that one. So USAA does financial services for military, veterans, and family members, insurance, banking, and retirement solutions. And so we were looking at them because of our insurance campaign. They sold off all of their investment management to something called Victory Capital. But through that, they do have 7.4 billion invested in fossil fuels. So they would be considered a fossil financial institution.
They somewhat creep into that category of Capital One. I mean, when you look at the bad guys, we're talking about several $100 billion, right? So the fact that they're, but I would go looking around if I had a USAA card.
Mm-hmm.
Well, friends, this has been really great. I hope that we got everybody's question. If you didn't, Michael Richardson is online to answer questions for people. You want to tell where that half-hour consult opportunity is on the internet?
Cathy, do you quickly have that link to This Is What We Did?
We'll find it, and we can email that out to everybody. We will be emailing the slides and the recording, and all the links in the slides that are clickable will still be clickable with what we email out.
Great.
Yeah, Cathy,
So just so it's clear, this is what we did has a calendar with times where you can go and sign up to get a one-on-one opportunity to talk with a consultant and ask all of these kinds of questions. And I wanted to lift that up because if you didn't get your question answered here this evening, there actually is a place you can go, and Cathy will put that link in the follow-up email.
Amy, would you take a moment? You did in the introduction of Cathy, you gave a little plug there on the work that we're doing with the curriculum and with This Is What We Did, Third Act, Green America, and Green Faith.
Sure. So Michael's been doing this work for over 3 years. Cathy and I have been doing this a little bit more recently, and we're learning all about credit cards, banks, et cetera. And what we found is that it takes a while to do this work. It's not always easy to just change. And it's helpful to have guidelines. It's helpful to have a group to do it with so you can ask each other questions and support each other. And so we are writing a curriculum. We're almost done, and it's going to have sessions on banking, credit cards, insurance, and investments. And each session goes, talks about what the problem is, and then talks about strategies for dealing with it and how you can move your money. So we're going to be excited to launch that curriculum, and that will be an opportunity for you to do that with your friends and family, with your neighborhood, with your community at church or temple. So this will be a great tool that people can use. You can share it with others once you've done it. You can, even become an expert yourself, believe it or not. It's a little slow going sometimes, but you can get there. It's all learnable. So we'll be delighted to share out that curriculum at the beginning or middle of next month. So thank you all so very much. I'm going to turn it back to Cathy to close out with a few final comments.
Right. Great. Thank you so much to Amy, Michael, and Fran. Thank you to Tyler, who's running this webinar behind the scenes. This wouldn't be happening without the work of people at Green America. And thanks to all of you for joining us today. We will be sending out the recording and the slides. The slides will come as a PDF, but it'll have links, and the links will be clickable. So thanks for being part of the Green America community. Together we can make a real difference in creating positive change for our planet and its people. So here are some ways you can keep the momentum going. If you'd like to learn about responsible credit cards, better banking, any of the other finance related topics, we'll follow up with a recording and slides. You can also follow all of the groups represented in tonight's webinar. Green America, Green Faith, and Third Act. Get on their mailing lists. The next webinar is be the fourth in this series, will be May 15th, Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. It's going to be on responsible insurance, and that's we've been working on a responsible insurance directory where it's beginning to be built out. We actually have at least one decent company in in every state, I think most states, and several in a number of states. So you can register for that at greenamerica.org/webinars. As I said, sign up for our email at greenamerica.org/sign-up. Get the latest on our campaigns, events, other webinars. And there's a lot of great gardening webinars if that interests you, and sustainability tips. You can follow Green America on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and recently TikTok. You can donate to Green America. So your support fuels this work for a greener, fairer future. And every contribution counts. So that will be at support.greenamerica.org. And remember that your actions matter. Where we put our money matters, and together we can build a more sustainable and just world. So thanks for your commitment to creating positive change, and we look forward to seeing you at future events. Stay green, stay connected, and stay inspired. Thanks so much for participating tonight.
Bye, everyone. Take care.
Bye.